Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. Thank you for tuning in today. We go to the phones and talk a little Texas political news that's out there. Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com, joining us on the phones this morning. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm good. Are we allowed to now say that fall has actually arrived? It felt like that sort of last week, and then it felt like 101 degrees. That was like in Austin yesterday. Now it's under 70 degrees.
It's fall. So Lubbock had the taste of fall, and then we had second summer, and now it's back to sort of fall, I think is what we're at right now.
I'm all for it. Bring on the cooler weather.
There you go. Let's see. Where do we begin? Let's talk about. I guess let's talk about what happened on what was it Friday, with in regards to straight ticket voting. Is this up in the air now, Scott? With just weeks to go before the election?
To a certain degree, it's up in the air, although I would imagine that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans would overturn this. We'll see, but we did see elections administrators all over the state. I saw one quote from the administrator in Bexar County in San Antonio. Her quote was, "Oh, my God." They would have to change everything about the way the voting machines work as people go to the polls in just a couple of weeks here. Of course, October 13th is the start of early voting for the general election in Texas, and we should point out this is the last week you can register to vote if you plan to vote in the Texas elections in November. October 5th, next Monday, 1 week from today, is when the deadline is to register. You can still register after that, Chad. I should be clear about that, but you can't vote in November if you do it on Tuesday next week. So
right, yeah.
Get that done if you if you want to participate in this deal. Straight ticket voting, it has been an underlying simmering issue in Texas. It's interesting, Chad, because it's not the first thing people think of when they start to talk about these elections, but it's so fundamental to the actual way people are going to vote. And it was already a big question. What does that mean for the elections that are down ballot from the president? Of course, so many people are fired up to vote. We have in excess of, I think, 6.4 million people registered now to vote in Texas. We have a new record for registered voters, and most people are interested in the presidential. But until the last election, as you and your listeners know, if you wanted to basically in November walk into the voting booth and push the button that says I'm a Republican or push the one that says I'm a Democrat, you could just do that and cast your vote and leave. Not anymore after the law that was passed a couple of sessions ago. This was actually this was 5 years ago at this point. When they passed this, they delayed implementation of getting rid of straight ticket voting until this election, the first time in which you were supposed to have to go down and choose each candidate in every single race. This judge down in Laredo, late on Friday, and Chad, I don't think they have any regard for what it does to us in the news business when they send out these rulings after 5 o'clock on Friday. But this federal judge said that, quote, by creating mass lines at the polls and increasing the amount of time voters are exposed to COVID-19, this bill would cause irreparable injury to Texas voters. All of the debates about this previously had been, more geared toward other issues, but at this point now it's about COVID-19, and we've had so many fights playing out on so many different levels about the mechanics of voting. Just last week, after I talked with you, the chairman of the Texas Republican Party, Alan West, sued Governor Abbott over expanding early voting because it's running for 3 weeks now under what the governor has laid out, and that was Abbott's way of sort of threading the needle and offering some more flexibility to people who maybe are afraid of getting COVID-19 by going in person to the polls, but he didn't want to expand mail-in voting options, and the governor, of course, has said that that would be the purview of the legislature. Some conservative Republicans, including Chairman West, along with Agriculture Sid Miller, have argued that no, the legislature ought to be the one to make the decision on any changes to the election code, and so they'll be battling that as well in court. It's playing out everywhere.
And see, that's interesting. Texas State Senator Charles Perry is on this lawsuit against the governor. And he has said numerous times, even over the weekend, that this has not as much to do with early voting as it is to do with this is our job. As a legislature, this is our job to handle, early voting and when early voting is going to be. And it's interesting that the governor says, well, mail-in balloting, that's the purview of the legislature, but not so much actual voting. How can he get away with saying one is true but not the other?
Yeah, I think his words are catching up to him on that. When the question was asked, why don't you take a look at expanding mail-in voting, he just basically said that's up to the legislature, but for expansion of in-person early voting, he can take it on himself to do that.
That makes no sense.
It's hard to see that as anything other than a double standard. So I do think that the plaintiffs in that case do have a point, but one thing that's happening here, Chad, is we're running out of time for the election. At some point, we need to know what the rules are so that people can just go have their voices heard. And I think that some of these late rulings, and we should be fair to those folks who filed the lawsuit about straight ticket voting, that was filed months ago, in response to coronavirus concerns. This new lawsuit that was filed just last week by the Republican Party of Texas and others, that came, up just last Wednesday. And so they're still kind of futzing around with the rules here about exactly how we're supposed to vote, and that's just confusing to people.
Don't you get the feeling that, these lawsuits, particularly against the governor, I know some, Republican activists are part of. This is it's almost we're going to challenge everything because, that's what you do. If you're going to challenge, if you think the governor has overstepped his bounds on one or two different issues, you challenge everything, hoping just to get your day in court and to say, okay, see, look, the governor has, overstepped his ways, and this needs to be tossed back to the legislature. It seems to me that's kind of the game plan for not only Republicans, maybe Democrats in the future, to say the governor has overstepped his boundaries is just to sue him on everything.
Yeah, the governor has created some interesting coalitions who are against him during this pandemic, where you have some liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats, who don't like the way that he has taken on more power and more responsibility for the way that all of this is playing out. There is a Disaster Act in Texas that says that the governor can act unilaterally on certain things in response to a declared disaster. And I was talking this through with some Capitol veterans this morning, Chad, who were making the argument that, look, just because people don't like it doesn't mean that that's not what the law says.
Right.
He actually can do that. What I have heard from some senior Republicans and some others as well, some very conservative Republicans, have been saying, and they first started to sort of say this under their breath earlier in the year, and now you see more of it, actually boiling over in the form of this lawsuit and some other things. They're arguing that, maybe if the governor if he does actually have this authority, then the legislature, when they convene in January, maybe they need to take a look at reforming that act so that the governor would be responsible to somebody. At the county level, and we've talked about this here on KFYO, at the county level, a county judge can act unilaterally, in a disaster situation, but only for 7 days. And then they have to go to the commissioner's court and get their green light to keep doing whatever it is that they're doing. And so what some lawmakers in Austin are talking about is doing the same thing with the governors. They would say that, look, you do have an executive for a reason, and when there are disasters, you want them to be able to act quickly to make sure that everything's okay and that resources are placed quickly and put into effect in such a way that they help people out. But after a certain period of time, be that 6 weeks or a couple of months, maybe the governor should also be required to go to the legislature and get the green light to continue doing whatever he's doing. And a couple of ways that could happen, Chad. It could be that the governor is required to call the legislature in at a certain point to get their okay, or they could write the bill in such a way that the legislature would be automatically called into session after a couple of months or some time frame they would set, such that they could review what he's doing.
Let's get into some of the different races that are out there. What are we hearing on the SD30 race? How's that going?
Things have been just straight into the gutter on that deal. You have Drew Springer, who's the chairman from Munster, the agriculture chairman in the Texas House, and Shelley Luther, the Rebel salon owner, who has really staked her campaign on being upset with Governor Abbott, the thing that we were just talking about. And you have accusations of inconsistency from Springer, who says that Shelley Luther's actually been all over the map on whether she agrees with shutdowns. He was calling her Shutdown Shelley at one point. I don't know if that was catching on, but the supporters of Luther are saying that Drew Springer is corrupt. He's part of the Austin Swamp and all of that. I don't know that that Springer did himself a favor in trying to interrupt that narrative by having so many Texas House members endorse him. If the accusation is that you're part of the Austin Swamp, and then part of what you're arguing to people is that all these other politicians say that I ought to be, the senator, I don't know that that helps you. But they are just two, of course, of 6 candidates who are trying to replace the outgoing Senator Pat Fallon. It's become sort of a race to the bottom as all these accusations have been lobbed, back and forth, Chad. And that tells me, all of that aside, the fact that they're attacking each other tells me that each of them, Luther and Springer, might actually see some sort of path toward winning this without a runoff. Because usually when you have a race where there are a lot of candidates and you're probably guaranteed to have a runoff, usually they all try to play nice in the first round of voting and see how far they can get, if they can get close to 50%. But in this situation, they're certainly not doing that. And let's say that Springer or Luther are one of the two who make it into a runoff. I don't think either one of them would endorse the other. If there was a runoff at this point, with as ugly as they've been to each other. That's generally the point when folks will play nice in the first round of something like this, that they might have to consolidate support by seeking out the endorsements of former candidates in a runoff. If it goes to a runoff, it would be up to Governor Abbott as far as when to set that.
Yeah, and that election is tomorrow night, right?
It is tomorrow night, and we will get some clear picture about, and I think this is going to be interesting, whether a candidacy that is based almost completely on opposition to Governor Abbott, the Republican governor, can a Republican candidate be successful with that message? If Shelley Luther is successful with that, I think it's sort of signaling a new era of Texas politics, because you do have a governor who, even a few months ago was still one of the most popular governors in the country with Republicans and Democrats.
I think it'll get if she wins. And I would say, Scott, even if she does very, very well, it'll give the green light to some other Republicans to go after Abbott leading up to the November election. Speaking of the November election, Bloomberg's gun control group looks like they're going to be spending some money here in Texas.
They say they're going to spend $2 million, which is on top of what some other third-party groups are doing. $6.4 million is pouring in from a group called Forward Majority, which they played a little bit in the last round of elections in 2018, and they were said to be sort of instrumental in helping some of the Democrats get over the finish line when they picked up 12 new seats in the Texas House, 2 new seats in the Texas Senate as well back in 2018. With all this money pouring in, it's real resources, Chad, which we have not seen for Democrats, prior to 2018. At this level of races, for legislative races. I think Beto O'Rourke spending, $80 million or something in 2018. That certainly created some coattails that helped those legislative candidates who were Democrats. How is this message going to play, though? I mean, it is from a gun control group, and this is still Texas. But I do think that you have softening support for groups like the NRA and other Second Amendment, groups and Second Amendment supporters and enthusiasts, if you will. That's sort of softening in some places, particularly in the suburbs, places like Collin County, Denton County, Fort Bend County, where even some Republicans are, and especially Republican women, are getting sort of tired of the idea that there can never be any gun control at all. I don't think these are people who would describe themselves as gun grabbers and want to, ban guns or anything like that. But I think there are some people out there who would say they're Republicans, but would also say that they're open to some kind of what they would call reasonable gun control. So this will be a test for how that sort of message works in those communities.
All right. Let's see. I think we have time to get to one more thing, and that is the reopening of Texas. You've got some lawmakers asking Abbott to move forward, huh?
You do. Drew Darby from San Angelo, a Republican, a respected member of the Texas House, wrote a letter last week that we have posted at quorumreport.com, where he said maybe they should take a regional approach approach to reopening bars. I know this has been a frustration of yours. Didn't you go to a bar?
No, it was a restaurant.
A restaurant
yes.
on Thursday,
yes.
Wednesday or Thursday. Yeah, it sure seemed like the exact same place you were at before, right?
Yes.
A lot of folks are very frustrated. I mean, I'm laughing, but it's a serious thing where you have one business on one side of the street that looks one way and the crowd looks one way. And then on the other side of the street, you would have a business where the crowd would look basically about the same, but they can't be open, right, because of their designation as either a bar or restaurant. And, Darby and others are really arguing for some flexibility here because, as Darby wrote in his letter, you have business owners who are just desperate to be able to reopen, take care of themselves and their employees, and they're looking for any kind of flexibility from the governor. So far, he hasn't done that, and that's why, another reason people are really upset with him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Scott, tell folks what they can find at quorumreport.com this week.
We will have the complete rundown for you of everything that's being said in that SD30 race that we were talking about a little bit earlier, the special election, and, of course, the complete results of that tomorrow night at quorumreport.com. You can sign up for our free email alerts. When the results come in, you'll know first because you're a subscriber at quorumreport.com.
Very good. Scott, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chad.
That's Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com. Chad Hasty Show News Talk, KFYO.